I was just the nanny, hidden away with the Alpha's children while the entire pack prepared for the mating ceremony. I had no idea the Alpha King himself had abandoned his own ceremony, his eyes locked on me for reasons I couldn't understand, until he did the unthinkable. The scent of lavender and fresh linen filled Emma's world as she rocked 3-year-old Sophia in her arms. In this quiet nursery tucked away in the Dallas estate, she was invisible, a ghost paid to care for children and be forgotten. Sophia finally settled, her breathing evening out, and Emma felt that familiar, hollow ache. A longing for something she'd never have. A family of her own. A place to truly belong. She pushed the feeling down like always. Wanting things only led to pain. Beyond the heavy door, sounds of celebration bled through. Laughter, music, champagne glasses clinking. Tonight, Alpha King Dominic was supposed to begin his official search for a Luna. The thought sent ice through her veins. She placed Sophia in her bed and turned to check on her twin brother Marcus. That's when the door opened. Victoria stood there, stunning in a sapphire gown, diamonds glittering at her throat. Her gaze swept over Emma with that look, the one that said tainted. The look that whispered about her parents' betrayal 20 years ago, a sin Emma wore like a brand. Victoria's lips thinned in disgust before she left without a word. What did my parents even do? No one would tell her the full story. Only that their betrayal nearly destroyed the pack. It was her legacy now, hers alone to carry. She retreated into her tasks, making herself smaller, more invisible. An ex-boyfriend's words echoed in her mind. No alpha will ever want the daughter of traitors. You're replaceable, Emma. Always will be. He was right. The pack needed a strong Luna like Victoria, not a broken Omega whose bloodline was cursed. Marcus suddenly woke with a piercing cry. Emma scooped him up, rocking him gently. When nothing else worked, she began to sing, an old lullaby her mother had taught her, words of moonlight and forgotten magic. His cries softened, then stopped. He stared up at her with wide, trusting eyes. Lost in the moment, Emma didn't realize her song was drifting beyond the nursery walls, weaving through stone corridors, seeking out a restless soul it was never meant to find. The final note faded into profound stillness. Emma held Marcus close, the distant celebration a reminder of the world she could only watch from shadows. 2 maids passed the nursery, their whispers sharp. "Did you see Victoria? She looks like a queen already. The Alpha King would be foolish not to claim her tonight." "Her bloodline is flawless," the other agreed. "He needs a strong mate. They say his wolf has been restless since he returned from the Northern Territories." The words hit Emma like stones. Flawless bloodline. Hers felt like poison. She busied herself straightening toys that were already neat, pushing away the gnawing sense of inadequacy. This nursery was her world. It had to be enough. Then the atmosphere shifted. The celebration noise dropped away, muffled into nothing. The air grew heavy with unseen pressure. Both children stirred simultaneously, sensing something primal. Someone was coming. The door opened slowly. A massive figure stood silhouetted in the doorway, blocking the light. Emma's heart leaped into her throat as he moved into the soft lamplight. The Alpha King. He was enormous, raw power barely contained in human form. His black shirt was unlaced at the throat, hair disheveled. He didn't look like a king at a ceremony. He looked like a predator. His eyes captured her, glowing like embers, fixed on her with terrifying intensity. Emma dropped into a deep curtsy, head bowed, trying to disappear. "Don't see me. Please just go away." An eternity passed in charged silence. Then his voice filled the room. A low, possessive rumble. "Emma!" She looked up, unable to stop herself. His eyes blazed with something between desperation and hunger. He took a step forward, then another. She scrambled backward until her spine hit Sophia's crib. Trapped. He reached out and wrapped his fingers around her wrist. His grip was iron, but a shocking bolt of heat traveled from his skin to hers. Not painful. Awakening. He held her there, thumbs stroking her wrist, searching her face as if memorizing every detail. Then he turned and pulled her effortlessly toward the door. As they reached the doorway, his gaze swept over her one last time, golden eyes flaring into a possessive inferno. A growl ripped from his chest, a single word that echoed through the hallway. Mine. The word echoed. Mine. Not a word. A brand. Dominic's grip on her wrist was unbreakable as he pulled her through endless corridors. Her thin slippers barely gripped the cold stone floor. His footsteps were heavy, deliberate, the sound of destiny charging forward. Hers were frantic stumbles, a terrified creature trying to escape. No, this can't be happening. They burst through the towering doors of the grand ballroom. 1,000 conversations died instantly. 1,000 eyes turned toward them, toward the Alpha King holding the wrist of a terrified nanny as if she were a prize. Emma wanted to vanish under their collective judgment. She felt their contempt like needles piercing her skin, but Dominic didn't slow. He moved through the parted crowd with singular purpose, pulling her to the raised platform where 2 ornate thrones sat. He stopped beside the Alpha's throne and turned to face the silent pack. He raised their joined hands high. A sharp gasp rippled through the hall. "Tonight, you expected me to choose a Luna," his voice roared, raw and guttural. "You expected politics, bloodlines, convenience." He paused, the silence so complete Emma could hear her own frantic heartbeat. His burning gaze dropped to her, softening for a breath. "My wolf has made its choice. My heart and soul have chosen." He looked back at the pack, his voice a deadly growl. "This woman is my mate." The declaration shattered the silence. Venomous whispers erupted. "The nanny, her parents were traitors. This is an insult." Emma trembled. This was worse than any nightmare. The hostility was a physical force threatening to crush her. She tried to pull her hand free, but his fingers tightened. Lord Sterling emerged from the crowd, silver hair gleaming, face a mask of cold fury. "Alpha King," he began, voice ringing with authority. "The law is clear. The Luna must be of noble bloodline, someone who strengthens the pack, not weakens it with a legacy of shame." Every word was designed to humiliate her. Emma wanted to run, but Dominic held her fast. Dominic remained still, watching. When Sterling finished, he finally moved, turning his head slowly to pin the elder in place. A low snarl vibrated in his chest. "The law serves the pack," Dominic growled dangerously soft. "And my mate will strengthen this pack because she is mine. Her legacy is now my legacy." He took a menacing step forward. "Challenge my choice, Sterling, and you challenge me." The threat was unmistakable. Another voice, smooth and sharp, cut through the tension. "Dominic." Victoria glided forward, icy composure intact. Her eyes were filled with hurt and rage. "After everything, you would disgrace your throne with her?" The words hinted at a shared history, at broken promises. For Victoria, this was personal betrayal. Dominic didn't even glance at her. His message was clear. Her feelings were irrelevant. With a final glare at Sterling, he turned his back on the council, on Victoria, on the entire assembly. He chose Emma over his kingdom. Hand still locked around her wrist, he pulled her from the platform, leaving behind a throne of thorns and a pack on the verge of rebellion. The heavy door slammed shut with dreadful finality. They were alone. The royal chambers should have been breathtaking, but felt like a cage. A massive fireplace stood cold. Towering bookshelves scraped the ceiling. The floor was covered in animal pelts. A predator's den, and she'd been dragged into its heart. He released her wrist, the skin red and tingling. He didn't look at her. Instead, he paced with restless, contained violence. Finally, her trembling voice found its way out. Why? Why would you do that? It has to be a mistake. Dominic stopped and slowly turned. The fury was gone, replaced by something far more unsettling. Desperate, agonizing pain. It is no mistake, he said roughly. For 3 years since the northern attack, my world has been gray. My senses were damaged. I can barely sense my own pack. Food tastes like nothing. The world is fog. The confession startled her. This explained the whispers, his restless energy. But you, he took a step closer, gaze intense. When you sang, it was like the sun breaking through clouds. I followed the sound, then your scent. He closed his eyes briefly. Jasmine and moonlight. You're the only thing I can smell clearly. The only thing that feels real. Her heart twisted. He hadn't chosen her out of love, but desperate need. She was his cure. He stalked toward her, backing her against a massive desk. You feel it too, don't you? He murmured, voice a low growl. This pull. It's the mating bond. It has awakened and chosen you. He was so close, his lips inches from her ear. The primal part of her recognized the truth. There was a pull, terrifying and undeniable, but her wounded heart screamed for escape, rejection, her only way out. His body went rigid, as if he'd heard her silent thought. Lethal coldness entered his eyes. He leaned closer, breath warm against her skin. His next words weren't a request. They were a vow, a world-shattering promise. Reject me, he whispered like silk over steel, and I will burn this world to ash. Morning arrived with cold, impersonal light cutting across a vast, unfamiliar chamber. Emma woke, gasping, heart hammering. She was drowning in silk sheets, the scent of lavender replacing the familiar comfort of the nursery. This wasn't her room. This was a gilded cage. Dominic's threat echoed. Reject me, and I will burn this world to ash. He'd left her here in the royal wing, a prisoner of his desperate claim. 2 servants entered without knocking, carrying armfuls of gowns in jewel tones. Emerald, sapphire, ruby. The clothes felt like a costume for a part she didn't know how to play. The maids worked in silence, refusing to meet her eyes. A new kind of invisibility. Before, she was overlooked because she was unimportant. Now she was avoided because she was a scandal, a queen with no allies, a mate with no love. She had to see the children. Their faces were her only anchor. Emma walked to the door, reaching for the handle. Forgive me, my lady. A royal guard stood outside, polite but firm as iron. The Alpha King has given explicit orders. You are to remain in these chambers for your own safety. My lady. The title felt like a cruel joke. She was a prisoner. Let me pass. The voice was a silken whisper from behind the guard. Victoria appeared, dismissing the guard with a flick of her wrist. She glided into Emma's chamber, eyes glittering with cold, predatory light. Enjoying the silks, little nanny? She purred with condescension. Don't get too comfortable. He tires of his toys quickly. She circled Emma like a wolf assessing prey. He'll discard you just like he discarded me. The words struck the center of Emma's deepest fear. Victoria paused at the door, delivering her final blow. An alpha's desperation is not the same as his devotion. Remember that. The door clicked shut. Emma stared at her reflection in a massive mirror, a frightened girl playing dress-up. A temporary queen already waiting to be thrown away. Days blurred into silent meals, empty hours, and the constant presence of the guard outside her door. Dominic was a phantom, a distant storm she could feel raging through the estate during tense meetings, but who never came near. Then, one evening at dusk, he appeared in her doorway. Come with me. He led her through quiet corridors, away from the grand spaces. back to the one place she yearned for, the nursery. The guards were gone. He pushed the door open, revealing Sophia and Marcus sleeping peacefully in their beds. Relief washed over her so powerfully it made her dizzy. She didn't wait for permission. She crossed the threshold and went to the children, smoothing Sophia's hair, adjusting Marcus's blanket. The children stirred, sensing her, then settled back into deep sleep. This was real. This was who she was. She felt Dominic's presence behind her, a silent, watchful mountain. "They're not just any children," he said quietly, voice rough with emotion he couldn't hide. "They're my brothers. My brother Ryan and his mate Claire were murdered 4 months ago." The confession hung heavy with grief. Not a rogue attack like the official story claimed. A hidden murder. This was the source of his pain, his wolf's agitation. He was entrusting her with his greatest weakness. Hesitantly, she reached out and placed a hand on his forearm. The muscle was tense as rock, but he didn't pull away. "Dominic," she whispered, using his name for the first time, "your secret is safe with me." In that quiet vow, everything changed. She was no longer just a mate taken by force. She was now a keeper of his secrets, a guardian of his heart. A fragile truce formed. In the evenings, Dominic would retrieve her, and they'd sit in the nursery together, watching the children sleep. Sometimes they'd share a silent vigil by the fire in his chambers. It was strange, fractured, a pantomime of family that wasn't real. Yet in those quiet hours, she began to see past the beast. She saw exhaustion carved around his eyes, the gentle way his hand would stroke Marcus's cheek, the deep grief that shadowed his face. A dangerous warmth began to grow in her chest. But this intimacy was shadowed by rising political strife. Dominic was under constant assault from the elder council. She'd hear his roar through thick doors. Lord Sterling's name a frequent bark. They were using her tainted blood to undermine his authority. Dominic's protectiveness intensified, becoming smothering. He forbade her from leaving the royal wing. The more he shut her out, the more their fragile trust began to fray. The tension finally snapped one evening. He stormed into his chambers after a vicious meeting, black fury rolling off him in waves. He paced before the fire, jaw clenched. Acting on instinct, Emma prepared chamomile tea and brought it to him. "Dominic." He stopped, turning to face her. As he looked at the simple offering, the rage in his eyes dissolved, replaced by raw, aching loneliness. He reached out, his hand closing over hers on the warm cup, fingers intertwining. "Emma," he breathed, voice thick with desperate longing. The air crackled with unspoken need. He gently took the cup, setting it aside. He didn't release her hand. Instead, he used it to draw her closer until only inches separated them. His gaze dropped to her lips. The world narrowed to this single moment. He leaned in, his scent overwhelming her, his lips parting slightly. Just as his lips were about to touch hers, he flinched back as if burned. Furious self-loathing twisted his features. He released her hand, turning his back so quickly it felt like a slap. "Get out!" he rasped, voice broken and jagged. The rejection was more painful than any insult. She stood frozen, heart aching with confusion and hurt. The intimacy had been real, she was sure of it. But the wall he kept between them was just as real and far more powerful. Suffocating tension became the new normal. For weeks after the near kiss, Dominic was a thundercloud on the horizon. Distant, watchful, dangerous. Emma, tired of watching the world through glass, finally found courage. She stood before him one morning, spine straight, and told him she was going to the estate gardens. After a long battle of wills, he conceded with a curt nod, on condition his guards surrounded her. The gardens weren't the sanctuary she hoped for. A group of nobles gathered by the roses. Among them was Lord Marcus, one of Sterling's most arrogant allies. his face a permanent sneer. He didn't address Emma directly. Instead, he turned to a companion, voice carrying, "It's a pity, isn't it, that the children of a true alpha like Ryan are now being raised by that." The insult was exquisitely cruel, aimed not at her, but at the children. Something different happened this time. Instead of withering, a spark of defiance ignited deep within her. She stopped, turning to face him fully. Dominic tensed beside her, a growl starting, but she subtly raised a hand. "You are mistaken, my lord," she said, voice calm and clear. The garden went silent. "The only pity here is that a noble title is wasted on a man who possesses neither honor to respect his king's choice, nor basic decency to respect the memory of a fallen alpha and his mate." She stepped closer, voice dropping to a threatening whisper. "Perhaps you've forgotten who their father was." "I have not." Marcus's sneer faltered, replaced by shock and uncertainty. Before he could respond, Dominic moved. He closed the distance in a single stride, grabbing the front of Marcus's tunic and lifting him from the ground. "You will not speak of my mate," Dominic snarled, eyes blazing golden fire. "You will not speak of my kin." He slammed Marcus against a stone archway, cracking the ancient stone. "If you ever do so again, I will tear the tongue from your worthless throat." He dropped the sputtering noble to the ground. The message was brutally clear. Later that night, as Emma walked the torchlit corridor back to her chambers, a black-fletched arrow suddenly thudded into the stone wall inches from her head, its shaft quivering. The game had changed. They weren't trying to shame her anymore. They were trying to kill her. The estate was now a fortress within a fortress. Guards patrolled every corridor, their silence a constant reminder of the arrow that nearly ended her life. Dominic was a tempest of contained rage and suffocating guilt. The failed attempt had frayed the last thread of their truce. It finally snapped in his chambers, the air thick with unspoken fear and resentment. "This is your fault," she cried out, words tearing from her raw and ragged. "This cage you keep me in does nothing. It only paints a bigger target on my back." His control, stretched thin for weeks, shattered. "I am trying to keep you alive," he roared, voice bouncing off stone walls. He swept a hand across a table, sending silver pitchers and goblets crashing to the floor. "I am trying to hold on to the one thing in this world that matters." The argument was a wildfire, consuming everything they'd never dared say. Then he let the truth slip, a truth more devastating than any blade. "How am I supposed to protect you when the bond won't even ignite properly?" he bellowed, hands clenched into fists, body trembling. "It isn't whole. It feels broken." He revealed his devastating secret. A true mating bond was a roaring conduit of shared strength, senses and feelings intertwined. But theirs was just a flicker, a pale spark because his wolf was too damaged from whatever happened in the north. He could sense her, feel the pull, but the final crucial connection remained unlit. The words struck Emma like a physical blow. Victoria's poisonous whisper echoed. An alpha's desperation is not the same as his devotion. It was true. All of it. He hadn't chosen her. He'd grabbed for a cure. Medicine that was now failing. Her deepest wound, the belief that she was unworthy, replaceable, was ripped open. She wanted it to end. She wanted to sever the broken wire causing them both agony. With tears streaming down her face, she walked toward him. She looked into his blazing, tormented eyes, the words of rejection forming on her lips. A final, destructive release. She began, voice a broken whisper. But as she opened her mouth to speak the ancient words, she saw it. Beneath the rage, beneath the desperation, sheer, unadulterated terror in his eyes. The great Alpha King was terrified of losing her. That single unguarded flicker stopped the word on her tongue. She couldn't say it, but the unspoken rejection now hung between them. a poison far deadlier than any arrow. The silence that followed was suffocating. The rejection she hadn't spoken was louder than any shout, a final crack in Dominic's shattered control. He stared at her, terror in his eyes slowly consumed by pure agony. A low, guttural groan escaped his lips. He clutched his head, his powerful body trembling. The emotional torment was too much. The dam inside him broke. A sickening crack echoed as his bones began to shift, his form contorting grotesquely. His roar of pain was no longer human, but monstrous, ripping through the room. This wasn't a controlled shift. This was violent, agonizing unraveling, a creature of pure rage clawing to the surface. Trapped between man and wolf, his eyes glowed with mindless golden fury. The half-shifted monstrosity lunged. There was no time to run. The room filled with snarls, massive clawed hands reaching for her. In that heart-stopping second, something deep within Emma shifted. Fear was eclipsed by strange, sudden calm. An instinct she never knew she possessed took over. She didn't scream. She didn't cower. As the beast descended, she reached out. Her hand, small and pale against the raging tempest of dark fur and shifting muscle, pressed flat against the center of his chest. Then it happened. A soft, silvery white light, cool and gentle as a moonbeam, flared from her palm. It wasn't a weapon of force, but of profound peace. The ethereal glow sank into his body, a silent, soothing wave, meeting the raging inferno within. The creature's enraged snarl faltered, stumbling into a whine of confusion. The violent spasms ceased. The golden fury dimmed, revealing the shocked human gaze of Dominic beneath. The raging storm inside him, the restless beast that had tormented him for years, was silent. For the first time since she'd met him, his wolf was utterly, completely at peace. He stumbled backward, the monstrous shift receding, leaving him fully human, panting and unsteady. He stared at her hand, then at his chest, stunned disbelief on his face. Emma looked down at her own palm, trembling. Where had that light come from? What had she just done? A sharp, urgent knock shattered the moment. A guard burst in, face pale. "My king, we've captured one of the assassins. He's alive." Dominic, expression a mask of conflicting emotions, tore his gaze from Emma and strode out. But as he left, Emma saw a figure in the hallway shadows. Victoria. Her face was cold, calculating realization. She hadn't seen exactly what happened, but she'd seen the flash of silvery light from under the door. She now knew with absolute certainty that the little nanny was something more, something powerful. And the look in Victoria's eyes was a new, far more dangerous vow. She would find out what Emma was, and she would destroy her for it. In the quiet days that followed, a new, unsettling dynamic took root. Dominic looked at her with bewildering awe, confusion, and fear that was almost reverence. He kept his distance as if she were something celestial he didn't dare get too close to. But Emma knew hiding was no longer an option. That strange power within her, coupled with the open threat from his enemies, meant she could no longer afford to be a shadow. She found him preparing for the morning's council meeting. He expected her to retreat. Instead, she straightened her shoulders, lifted her chin, and spoke 2 words that changed everything. "I'm coming." This was not a frightened servant being dragged to her fate. This was a choice. As they walked the grand corridor toward the council chambers, shock rippled through the estate staff. They moved not as king and servant, but as a united front. When they entered, the low conversations ceased instantly. Lord Sterling and the other elders were seated around the massive table, their faces hardening at the sight of her. Dominic strode to his place at the head, the Alpha's throne of dark wood and pelts. But instead of gesturing for her to stand behind him, he simply nodded to the empty space at his right hand, the seat reserved for the Luna. The challenge was silent, yet it screamed across the room. Her heart hammered. Every eye was on her, waiting for her to falter. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction. With a steadying breath, Emma walked across the stone floor, her steps echoing in charged silence. She reached the spot beside the king, and instead of sitting, she simply stood, hands clasped loosely in front of her. She met Lord Sterling's glacial glare and did not flinch. I am here. I am his mate, and I am not afraid of you. When the meeting ended, as the elders filed out, she overheard Sterling's low, venomous whisper, "She grows too bold. This cannot continue." The reply was chilling. She must be dealt with before the coronation, or all is lost. Her gambit had succeeded. They no longer saw her as a pawn. They saw her as a threat that had to be eliminated. An uneasy quiet settled over the estate. Emma, emboldened by her small victory, began to carve out a space for herself. She even thought she'd found an ally, a young serving girl named Lily, with wide, innocent eyes and a gentle smile. Lily would bring her meals, sharing harmless gossip. Emma had begun to trust her. That trust would be her undoing. One evening Lily brought dinner with a special goblet of dark-spiced wine. "A gift, my lady," she said, smile sweet as ever, "to help with the nerves." Grateful, Emma accepted the drink, savoring its warmth. At first it was pleasant heat spreading through her limbs, but the warmth soon gave way to creeping numbness. Her fingers felt heavy, thoughts slow and sticky. When she tried to stand, her legs buckled. Cold dread washed over her as her vision blurred, colors fading to murky gray. Her throat felt like it was closing up. She stumbled toward the door, a silent scream trapped in her throat. Then the world went black. Dominic found her. The sound that ripped from his chest was not human. It was a roar of pure, apocalyptic grief and rage that shook the foundations of the estate. He bellowed for guards, for healers, his voice the sound of a world breaking apart. Claws tore through the skin of his fingertips. His eyes blazed with untamed fire. The agony of seeing her dying shattered his sanity. He turned on the onlookers, a whirlwind of destructive fury, a half-shifted beast on the verge of slaughtering everyone in the room. As darkness threatened to pull her under completely, Emma saw the monster he'd become, in his grief for her. And in that terrifying, beautiful moment, she felt no fear. With the last ounce of strength, she pushed herself forward, her hand reaching out to clutch his face, now contorted in a snarl. She pulled him down, her voice a choked, ragged whisper. "Dominic," she breathed, "I'm not afraid of you." Her words, her touch pierced the red haze. He froze, the monster receding, replaced by the terrified man. With a sob torn from his soul, he scooped her limp body into his arms and roared for the royal healer. She survived. The healer's knowledge combined with a strange, resilient life force within her pulled her back from the brink. The estate was in chaos. Lily had vanished, a clear confession of guilt and allegiance to the council. Dominic, consumed by a singular need to both avenge her and solidify her position beyond doubt, made a desperate gamble. He invoked the Luna trials, ancient, perilous rites of passage, designed to prove a mate's worthiness. A tradition unused for centuries. His final, defiant move. The first trial took place at dawn in the sacred grove, a circle of ancient moss-covered stones pulsing with old magic. Emma had to walk an ethereal path to retrieve a moonstone from the grove's heart, while braving magical illusions of her deepest fears. Lord Sterling and the elders were there to officiate. Victoria watched from the clearing's edge, a smug smile on her lips, certain the little nanny would be broken. As Emma stepped onto the path, the world shimmered and changed. Whispers of her past rejections, faces of scornful nobles swirled around her like phantoms. She pushed through them, focus narrowed on the glint of the moonstone ahead. But just as she neared her goal, the trial shattered. Black-clad assassins swarmed into the sacred grove, blades gleaming. This was the council's final gambit: murder her during the trial, and claim the sacred magic itself had rejected her. Chaos erupted as royal guards clashed with attackers. One assassin broke free, eyes landing on an easier target. In a pavilion set aside for the ceremony, Sophia and Marcus lay in their bassinet. Emma saw him. Without hesitation, she abandoned the trial. She launched herself forward, throwing her body in front of the bassinet, shielding the children. A searing white-hot pain exploded in her shoulder as the assassin's dagger plunged downward. But the children were safe. Dominic, having just felled another attacker, witnessed the entire act. He saw her bleed to protect his kin, his future, his heart. For him, the trial was over. She'd proven her worth not with magic, but with love so fierce it defied death. As he roared and charged the final assassin, Victoria saw her opportunity. With Emma wounded and Dominic distracted, she stepped into the center of the grove, voice ringing with triumphant malice. She bleeds with courage, I'll grant you that. But it's the courage of a traitor's whelp. Her words echoed off ancient stones. Her blood is poison. She is the daughter of Marcus and Lauren, the very wolves who betrayed the last king and tried to sell this pack to our sworn enemies. Her moment of greatest heroism was instantly eclipsed by the public revelation of her deepest shame. The echo of Victoria's accusation hung in stunned silence. Daughter of Marcus and Lauren. The words were a death sentence. The sharp pain in Emma's shoulder was nothing compared to the inferno of shame consuming her. She felt the air shift. Pack members who'd witnessed her brave act now stared with dawning, sickening horror. The brief respect in their eyes was extinguished, replaced by suspicion and hatred. Lord Sterling seized the moment, striding into the clearing, powerful voice booming. It all makes sense now. This is not the king's fated mate. This is a viper we welcomed into our midst. He twisted events into a sinister narrative. The king's obsession, the attacks staged to make her seem a victim. It's all a lie, a plot to finish the treason her parents began. The accusation was masterful in its cruelty, seeping into the ears of the fearful pack. This was rock bottom. Wounded, exposed, framed as a mastermind of conspiracy she couldn't comprehend. She stands accused of high treason, Sterling boomed with finality. By ancient laws, there is only one punishment. She must be executed. The demand for her death rippled through the crowd, a chant of justice and traitor rising. Dominic scooped her into his arms, radiating furious, desperate defiance. He carried her from the grove, not as a conquering hero with his Luna, but as a cornered king retreating with his accused mate. She buried her face in his chest. She'd been named hero and traitor in the same instant, and now the pack she'd saved was begging for her blood. Her shoulder had been bandaged. The physical wound was proof of her loyalty, yet it meant nothing. In the pack's eyes, the scar was merely another mark of deceit. Dominic stayed with her, but he was no longer a king radiating power. He was a tormented man, pacing like a caged lion, his helplessness more terrifying than his rage. A messenger arrived with news that sealed their fate. Sterling had rallied the noble houses. Their ultimatum: deliver the traitor's daughter for execution, or they would secede. They would shatter the kingdom, plunge the pack into bloody civil war. The agony on Dominic's face was unbearable. He was being crushed between two impossible loves: his duty to his people and the primal command to protect his mate. Seeing him so broken awakened the old belief inside Emma that she was a burden, a curse whose only value was in being erased. With tears streaming, she went to him, hands finding his. "Let me go, Dominic," she begged, voice breaking. "Give me to them. Don't let the pack bleed for me. My life isn't worth it." It was the ultimate expression of her brokenness, a desperate attempt to prove the terrible lie she'd always believed about herself. He stared at her, golden, eyes a maelstrom of conflict. Every instinct screamed at him to protect her, but the weight of the crown demanded sacrifice. As they stood locked in that terrible stalemate, Victoria appeared in the doorway. She looked at Emma with soft, calculated pity, far more cruel than triumph. "Oh, you poor naive thing," she whispered, voice of venomous caress. "Don't you see how this ends?" She glided closer. "He is an alpha. In the end, a true alpha always protects the pack. He will always choose the kingdom." She let the words sink in, a final, devastating poison, before gliding away. Dominic's tortured silence felt like confirmation. Victoria was right. The choice was already made. The great hall was repurposed for judgment. Emma stood on a raised platform, facing the grim council and assembled pack. A strange, hollow calm settled over her. She'd accepted this. Her death would be her final act of love. Sterling listed the charges, speaking of her parents' betrayal in lurid detail, selling pack secrets, enabling an enemy ambush that cost dozens of lives. He painted Emma not as their innocent daughter, but as their patient, vengeful legacy. Just as Sterling raised his hand to pronounce the verdict of death, the great doors swung open. Dominic entered, but this was not the king they knew. He wore no crown, no royal finery, just simple black leather. His face was pale and drawn, but his eyes held terrifying, resolute calm. He didn't go to the throne. He walked through the parted crowd until he reached the platform. He faced the council, gaze sweeping over them, devoid of rage, filled only with profound sorrow. "You demand a price for the sins of the past," he said quietly, but his voice resonated with power that filled every corner. "You believe she is that price. You are wrong." He didn't argue. He didn't plead. He offered them a trade. He drew the ceremonial dagger from his belt and laid it on the platform. Then, in a move that sent a collective gasp through the pack, he twisted the Alpha King's signet ring from his finger, the symbol of his power, the heart of the kingdom. "I am the price," he declared, voice breaking with the weight of his words. He placed the ring beside the dagger. "I will renounce my throne. I will abdicate and surrender my power to this council." He looked at Sterling, eyes burning with unconditional love. "I will give you my crown, my kingdom, my entire life in exchange for hers." The world stopped. This singular, impossible act shattered Emma's understanding of her own worth. He was choosing her, not just over his own life, but over his sacred duty, his legacy, his very soul. The realization was devastating, beautiful agony. She could not let him do this. She opened her mouth to refuse, to sacrifice herself as intended. At that exact moment, a single pure beam of white light lanced through a high window, illuminating the platform. The full moon was rising. A low, guttural sound started deep in Dominic's chest. It grew into a roar of heart-shattering agony as his body began to tremble violently. The strain of offering his own soul for hers was breaking him. Dominic's roar was the sound of a soul tearing itself apart. Watching him come undone for her, something inside Emma shifted. The desperate wish to die was burned away, replaced by a ferocious need to live for him, to fight for him. The moonlight streaming through the window didn't feel cold. It felt like a jolt of life, warmth spreading through her veins like liquid starlight. The whispers about her parents echoed differently now. Not an accusation, but a question. What if the story was a lie? What if her blood wasn't poison, but a legacy of something powerful? As Dominic's body began to contort, the agonized shift threatening to consume him. She moved. She walked onto the platform, no longer a victim, but a woman walking toward her destiny. She placed both hands flat against his chest, right over his heart. This time it wasn't a flicker. It was a flood. Brilliant, blinding silver-white light erupted from her palms, pouring into his body. The light was cool, calming, carrying the impossible scent of jasmine and sacred places. The entire hall gasped as one. The moonlight in the room seemed to bend, channeling itself directly through her. With the surge of power came a dizzying flood of ancestral knowledge, images and feelings not her own. She saw faces with her eyes, felt power in her hands. She understood. She was not the descendant of traitors. Her bloodline was rare, ancient, sacred. They were moon healers, a line of wolves with the ability to soothe the savage beast, to mend the spirit, to channel the goddess's very essence. Her parents hadn't been traitors. They'd been a threat to dark power, and they'd been eliminated, their legacy twisted into a curse. The flaw she'd carried her entire life was never a flaw. It was her greatest strength. Her touch did more than halt his transformation. The silver light sank deeper, finding the old festering wound on his soul, the damage from the northern attack, and it began to heal the scarred tissue. The tormented rage in his eyes cleared, replaced by dawning, blazing hope as he stared at her, truly seeing her for the first time. Across the hall, Sterling and the elders stared in abject horror. The weapon they'd wielded, the narrative of her tainted blood, had just been obliterated by a display of divine power. The traitor they'd condemned was touched by the goddess herself, and in the stunned, reverent silence, a new, terrifying question began to form. What have we done? The hall was trapped in absolute silence. Dominic, his wolf steady and calm for the first time in 3 years, seized the advantage. He took Emma's hand, no longer a brand of ownership, but a gesture of profound partnership. He led her from the platform, gaze daring anyone to challenge them. For the first time, the council was silent, too shocked, too afraid. Back in the king's chambers, he looked at her with awe that humbled her. The great Alpha King brought to his knees by a grace he never knew existed. She was filled with quiet strength, finally understanding her own worth. "My parents," she began, voice clear and strong, telling him everything she'd seen. "They weren't traitors. They were healers. Someone in the old king's court feared their power, so they were framed, destroyed." Together they looked at the pieces, the council's campaign, Sterling's obsession, all built on lies used to control the pack for decades. But how could they prove it? Dominic spoke of a legend, a dangerous, forgotten ritual. "The blood oath," he said, voice low and intense, "a bonding ceremony under the full moon before the entire pack. We offer our blood, our spirits, our souls to each other and the goddess. If it succeeds, our bond will be absolute. Your power will be sealed as a divine gift." He paused, eyes serious. "But if it fails, it could shatter us both." "An all-or-nothing gambit." "We'll do it," Emma said, voice unwavering. As they stood together, the chamber door burst open. A guard stumbled in, face bleeding. "My king," he gasped. "Lord Sterling, he's made his move. He and his loyalists are storming the royal wing. Assassins are inside." The sounds of battle erupted from the corridor, clash of steel, snarls of fighting wolves. Their sacred plan had just collided with the council's final murderous act. The battle was no longer politics or rituals. It was here. It was now. And it was for their lives. The doors splintered, exploding inward. Assassins poured into the room, blades ready. The council's final bloody answer. Dominic was ready. With a roar of pure alpha power, he let his wolf take over. The shift was instantaneous, a breathtaking whirlwind of shadow and strength. A massive black wolf stood where the man had been, golden eyes blazing with clear, cold light. He was no longer broken. He was magnificent. He met the assassin's charge like a tidal wave, a storm of black fur, flashing claws, snapping teeth. He fought to protect the chambers, the children, her. But there were too many. They were trying to get past him. The children, awakened by the terrifying clash, began to wail. Their cries cut straight into Emma's heart. The last vestige of the frightened nanny burned away, consumed by fire. She was no longer a servant to be saved. She was a Luna. This was her den. An assassin slipped past Dominic's flank, poisoned dagger raised, eyes fixed on the crying infants. Emma moved without thinking. She grabbed a heavy chair and swung it with desperate strength. The wood crashed against the assassin's side, sending him stumbling. She held no weapon, but she was a mother protecting her young. Her act gave Dominic the moment he needed. He spun, massive jaws closing around the attacker, ending the threat. For one brilliant moment she'd fought with him, a partner in battle. As the fight raged, a desperate assassin lunged his poisoned blade, slicing deep along Dominic's flank. The wolf let out a pained yelp but finished the last attacker before the toxin could take hold. As the final enemy fell, Dominic stumbled, his massive form wavering. He collapsed, the great wolf suddenly vulnerable. Without hesitation, Emma was at his side. She pressed her hands to the bleeding, blackened wound, calling on the silvery power. But it wasn't enough. The poison was too strong. Acting on instinct deeper than thought, she did the unthinkable. She bit down hard on her own wrist, tearing the skin, and pressed the bleeding wound against his. Her blood, the sacred blood of a moon healer, sizzled as it met his tainted flesh. The silver light flared, no longer just soothing, but aggressively cleansing, neutralizing the poison and knitting torn muscle back together. She knelt on the floor of their ruined chambers, healing her fallen king with her own life force, proving her worth in the most visceral way imaginable. Days later, the great hall was transformed. The scars of battle replaced by garlands of white moonflowers, their sweet scent filling the air. Silver banners bearing a new sigil, a black wolf and silver moon intertwined, hung from the rafters. Today was not a trial or battle. It was celebration, a coronation, a promise of new beginnings. Emma stood at the back of the hall, a tremor of nerves running through her. But it was joyful, exhilarating. She was no longer afraid of being seen. She was ready. The music began, soft, beautiful melody speaking of hope and renewal. She walked down the long aisle, steps steady and sure. The entire pack was present, and as she passed they looked at her not with scorn, but with genuine reverence and love. Just ahead, Sophia and Marcus toddled along, scattering moonflower petals with joyous abandon. She reached the platform where Dominic waited. The look on his face, pure, undiluted happiness, made him seem younger, chasing away the last shadows that had haunted him. He was not just a king. He was a man deeply, truly, completely in love. He took her hands in his. A guard brought forward the Luna's crown on a velvet cushion, not heavy and opulent, but a delicate circlet of woven silver shaped like intertwined moonflower vines, a single perfect pearl resting in the center. Dominic held it up for the pack to see, but before placing it on her head, he spoke his final vow, a testament to their entire journey. "The world saw you as a servant," he said, voice ringing with passion. "They saw you as a shadow to be overlooked. They were blind." He looked directly into her eyes, his soul laid bare. His voice dropped, becoming an intimate promise heard by all. "I see you, Emma. From the very first moment I heard your voice, my soul recognized yours." He smiled, a genuine expression of pure joy. You were never just the nanny. You were never a placeholder. In my heart, you were always my queen." With infinite tenderness, he placed the silver crown upon her head. It settled as if made for her, a cool, lightweight destiny. The pack erupted in a joyous, unrestrained roar of love and celebration. Dominic leaned in and kissed her, a deep, passionate kiss filled with the promise of 1,000 tomorrows, a future they would build together. As they broke apart, he pulled her close, the children now held securely in their arms, a perfect, complete family looking out at their united, hopeful kingdom. The invisible girl was gone forever. In her place stood a beloved queen, her worth no longer a question, but the unshakable foundation of a new world.